What can I say? I was completely taken by surprise and didn't know how to react to it. My wife Maggie just gave me a little surprise, although that's not saying much. It was a huge surprise. In fact, let it be two huge surprises. In general, I was completely confused. "Mac, we need to talk," she said as I walked in from work. She was still in her business suit from her job as an accountant, while I was in my coveralls from managing my chocolate business. "I'm Angus Mac McDougall, and my wife is Margaret Sullivan McDougall. Yes, she uses a hyphenated last name, which I find a bit pretentious. But whatever. She goes by Maggie. I'm of Scottish heritage, and she's of Irish descent. I guess that should have been my first hint that we weren't exactly a perfect match, but damn it. I was smitten with her golden blonde hair, green eyes, and amazing figure from the moment I saw her. We had first crossed paths a decade ago, right after I had finished my Army service, and we started college together. She was 18, while I was 22. I was using the GI Bill to pursue a degree in culinary arts, and she was studying for an accounting degree, as mentioned earlier. For some inexplicable reason, we clicked. Perhaps it was because she had a deep appreciation for chocolate, and I was passionate about making chocolate candies, cookies, and pretty much anything chocolate-related. My mother loved chocolate, and many other women did too. It was a high-demand market with a consistent appeal. Unlike many businesses that see a spike in sales around Christmas, chocolatiers can thrive year-round. Christmas, of course, but also Valentine's Day, Easter, Independence Day, and so on. Valentine's Day often rivals Christmas in terms of chocolate demand, and in fact, my small chocolate shop factory usually performs better during Valentine's Day than Christmas. And by the way, I absolutely detest my first name, Angus. Seriously, Mom? You had to name me Angus? I introduce myself as Mac to everyone. Nobody calls me Angus, not even my wife. Well, my parents use it when they're angry with me. But otherwise, I'm Mac. Maggie had just told me that we needed to talk, and I instantly tensed up. Every guy knows what those 4 words mean when they're put together like that. We recognize it and fear it. We need to talk has historically been the precursor to breakups and divorces. So with a sense of impending doom, I sat down at the table and looked at her, bracing myself for the worst. I knew my world was about to collapse. We'd been together for 10 years, 8 of which were happily married. At least I thought they were. I'd believed Maggie felt the same way. My mind raced through the possible reasons for what she was about to say. Intimacy? It's impossible. We had a great bed life. We regularly engaged in intimacy, 4 or 5 times a week and often for a long time. Money? Unlikely. I was earning 6 figures a year net, close to $250,000 after accounting for overhead, payroll, taxes, and so on. We were doing very well financially with a combined income near $375K a year. We were far from struggling. Lack of love? Not from my side. I loved her with all my heart and soul. Had she fallen out of love with me? We had just been discussing starting a family a week ago. She broke my reverie by sliding the dreaded manila envelope across the kitchen table as I took my seat. "Maggie, please tell me this isn't what I think it is," I said, searching her face for any sign of emotion, but her expression was a carefully crafted mask that revealed nothing. "I'm sorry, Mac," she replied softly. "I should have talked to you sooner, but I want a divorce." "Why?" I asked, trying to keep my voice calm despite the turmoil inside. "It's complicated," she said, averting her gaze. "You've met someone else?" I stated, realizing I was still in shock since I hadn't erupted in anger yet. "Yes," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "How long?" I asked, feeling a deep sense of numbness. I should have been standing, seething and pacing while unleashing a torrent of rage and threats. I should have felt something more than this overwhelming emptiness. 8 months, she said. I closed my eyes and repeated, 8 months? You've been cheating on me for 8 shit months, and the first I hear about it is when you want a divorce. I shrugged. I guess you're planning to take me to the cleaners in court. Since alienation of affection isn't recognized here in California, I have very few options. No, Mac, she said, shaking her head slowly. Your affairs are yours alone. The house is mine by inheritance from my grandparents, but I'll give you a few days to move out. Of course, after you've found a new place. I'll be seeking minimal alimony until I remarry, but it won't be anything that'll break the bank. I let out a sigh. Do I know him? I finally asked. If you do anything to him, you'll end up in jail, she warned unnecessarily. Not that I didn't want to deal with him, but I wasn't ready to jeopardize my business over it. I'm aware of that, but I still have a right to know who's been messing with me for the last 8 months, I said with a shrug. Reginald Pennington, she replied, standing tall. Well, that was another bombshell. I already despised him before this revelation. Now I was furious. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath to calm down. Reginald Pennington, blonde, blue-eyed, obscenely rich thanks to old money, the epitome of the master race, as well as an ultra-snob with a mile-wide streak of racist bigotry. I had warned Maggie about him after we had dinner discussing some charities we were all involved with. She'd dismissed my concerns, saying he was harmless. Yeah, right. Harmless like a damn rattlesnake. We met at a charity event in our neighborhood, and even then I was uncomfortable with the way he looked at Maggie. His gaze on me was full of contempt, while he looked at her with obvious lust. Struggling to contain my anger, I was finally able to meet Maggie's gaze again. Well, I guess there's not much I can do about it, I said with all the nonchalance I could muster. I wish it hadn't come to this, Mac, she said with a sad smile that I knew was just a pretense. She was just trying to ease my pain, but I could see right through her. That's a lie, Mags, I replied calmly. A plan already matured in my head. Well, that's fine. I'm not going to dispute the divorce as long as it's as you say. I'll have my lawyer review the papers before I sign them, just so you know. She nodded. I didn't expect anything less, Mac. Just so you know, it's not about what you did or didn't do. It's just that Reginald and I have a deep connection. I really love you, but I'm in love with him. I'm truly sorry about what happened, Mac. What nonsense. She was in love with his money. His family is worth billions. During the charity ball, I noticed that he was dancing too close to Maggie, and when they broke up, he straightened up when she returned to our table. I knew for sure that he would not be able to satisfy her in bed. But, not wanting to add fuel to the fire yet, I just said, I'm sorry too. After our brief conversation, she handed me the manila envelope. You'll be officially served in the morning, Mac. I'll be at Tim's office with my lawyer. This is just a preview of what I expect from the settlement. Tim Grayson, my best friend since grade school and my lawyer for all matters related to McDougal's chocolate factory, was whom she was referring to. You know what? Eliminate the alimony and we've got a deal. Reggie is wealthy. You don't need my money, do you? I knew it was a long shot, but she owed me at least that. She paused to consider it. If she agreed, I might even abandon the plan that was already taking shape in my mind. No, Mac. I want something from this. After all, I spent 10 years of my life with you. That statement, that our entire marriage, and even our dating and engagement had been a waste of her time, infuriated me. I glanced at the proposed alimony and raised an eyebrow. She was asking for $2,200 a month for 2 years, or until she remarries, whichever came first. That amount was roughly half of my monthly income after covering overhead and paying my employees. I could manage on it, and I had more than enough saved in my personal account. I pretended to ponder it for a moment. All right. I suppose it'll be worth it in the end, I finally said with a shrug. I'm going to pack now. I'm leaving tonight. And I did just that. I packed my suitcase and garment bag with clothes, toiletries, and all the essentials. I also included my extensive collection of music CDs, which spanned genres from Marty Robbins and Metallica to Mozart. Yeah, it covered all those bases. Hell, I even tossed in some Sir Mix-a-Lot for fun. I loaded everything into Bullet, my 1968 Mustang Fastback 390 GT, and took off. I was out of there in under an hour and called Kat on my cell as soon as I hit the road. "Hey, Mac, what's going on?" Kat answered on the second ring. "Kat, I just got kicked out, and I'm getting served with divorce papers at Tim's office tomorrow morning. Maggie's trading up, or at least she thinks she is." I snorted, letting the bitterness seep into my voice. "Seriously? Are you kidding me?" She sounded as stunned as I felt. "Not kidding. I'll be staying at the Holiday Inn until I can find a place," I responded. "Oh, hell no, you get over to my place right now, mister." She was using her ghetto tone, as she puts it. "All right. Yes, ma'am." I laughed despite myself. "Good. See you soon." She ended the call, and I couldn't help but smile and shake my head ruefully. Katrina Monroe is my manager at the chocolate factory. She resembles a younger Aisha Tyler standing at 6 feet tall, a Nubian goddess, as we say. We all call her Kat, and she's fine with it. Her boyfriend, Darius Jackson, plays for the LA Dodgers, which earns him points in my book. He's currently away on an 8-game road trip and will be back next week. That meant I could crash at Kat's guest room for a few nights before he got back. Honestly, Darius was pretty laid back with me, so I might be able to extend my stay a bit longer. But no, I needed to find my own place. With the money I had in the bank, I could probably afford to buy a decent house outright. However, the community property split hadn't happened yet. Damn it. It looked like I'd have to rent an apartment for a while before I could buy a house again. My thoughts were cut short as I realized I was almost at Kat's place. Her boyfriend only stayed there occasionally, but he kept pushing her to move in with him in LA. Kat wasn't ready to make that move yet, though. She wanted a full commitment from him first, specifically a ring. So here I was, 32, in great shape, a millionaire, but devastated and knocked down by the woman I loved and married. My soon-to-be ex-wife, the unfaithful gold digger. I pulled into Kat's driveway and parked next to her little Ford Fusion. That tiny car seemed to shrink in comparison to Bullet. I smirked as I revved the engine one last time before turning off the big V8. As I opened the trunk and grabbed my suitcase, I saw Kat step out of the house, wearing nothing but some Daisy Dukes and a tank top. It took my breath away when I saw her body. I quickly pushed those thoughts aside. I closed the trunk and walked over to her, and Kat let me in without saying a word. Her expression was a mix of disbelief and other conflicting emotions. I was pretty sure I was still in shock at that moment. In fact, I was functioning on autopilot. As soon as I got inside, I dropped the suitcase and fell to my knees. The reality of what had happened finally hit me with full force. I had been compartmentalizing my feelings for as long as I could, but now everything came crashing down, spilling out of my eyes. I sobbed uncontrollably as tears streamed down my face and Kat wrapped her arms around my shoulders, kneeling beside me. I clung to her, finding solace in her presence, which kept me grounded and prevented me from completely withdrawing into myself. "Shh. It's okay now. You're going to be fine, Mac," she comforted. "No, I won't," I said, shaking my head. I knew I was wallowing in self-pity, and I wasn't denying it. She responded by pulling my head to her chest, offering the comfort of a close friend. It wasn't romantic love, but it was the love of someone who truly cared. She helped me to my feet, and we made our way, well, she walked and I stumbled, into the living room, where I collapsed onto her large leather couch. "Hey, we can watch Darius play. The Dodgers are up against the Braves tonight in Atlanta." She tried to lift my spirits, knowing how much I love baseball. I sniffled like a child. "Okay, I guess it couldn't hurt." I attempted a smile, but it probably came out more as a grimace. She turned on the TV and the game was already in the fourth inning with the Dodgers leading 4-2. It did lift my spirits a bit and took my mind off my troubles. Kat grabbed us both a beer and we settled in to watch the game. It was a close match for a while, but we ended up clinching the win in extra innings. By the end, we were laughing and cheering as Darius caught the fly ball to end the game and secure another thrilling Dodgers victory. I was taking a big gulp of the local microbrew when suddenly Kat's laughter stopped. "You have got to be kidding me," she shouted, her mouth agape in shock as she glared at the TV. I followed her gaze and saw Darius kissing a woman on screen. It wasn't just a quick peck. They were deep in a passionate kiss. "Is there something in the water?" I muttered, the only thing I could think to say as I watched Kat's relationship crumble along with my own. "This damn water must contain illegal substances," she snapped. I looked at her, and the intense gaze of her dark brown eyes made me feel uneasy. "And a white woman? He said he doesn't even like white women." I listened to her pour out her soul to him for about 20 minutes. Then she turned to me and burst into tears herself. I returned the favor by hugging her while she talked. When she finally stopped crying, she looked at me with red, swollen eyes that were very similar to my own. "Look at us, huh? Two are the same." She laughed sadly, and I smiled as a few tears rolled down my cheeks. Well, at least Maggie did it alone with me. I shrugged my shoulders. "This jerk showed it on national television. I'm so sorry, Kat." "It's not your fault, honey." She hugged me tightly, then grabbed her cell phone. "I'm sorry, I'll call this cheater and let him know what's going on." "Go on." I nodded when she pressed the speed dial button. "Hi, Darius. Yeah. Yes, we watched the game. Mac came because his unfaithful wife is divorcing him and threw him out. No, he's staying with me for a few days. Until he finds a place to live." "No. And that's why I'm calling you. I saw you kissing that woman." She paused for a moment to listen, rolling her eyes. She put her finger to her lips and switched to speakerphone so I could hear. I nodded in agreement. "But, baby, I'm just fooling around. I have my own needs, you know. She means nothing to me. I just need something on the side while I'm on the road. You have to understand that." This jerk was whining and begging. As far as I understood, he no longer belongs at the Dodgers. "Well, Darius, it's over between us now," she said firmly. "I'll send your stuff back to your house in Los Angeles. I don't want to see you or hear about you or anything like that. Do you understand?" "But, baby," he began with desperation in his voice. "No. You lost the right to call me baby when you kissed that woman on national television. I will not tolerate this. It's over between us. DONE. Finished. FINISED. Think about it right now. Goodbye, Darius. I hope it was worth it." Before he had the chance to complain any further, Kat ended the call and blocked his number. She looked at me with a wry smile and said, "Well, that's that. Zero tolerance." I nodded in agreement. Zero tolerance. I'm with you, Kat. Cheaters don't deserve another shot. "So what's happening with the divorce? Don't tell me she's going to drain you financially. I swear I'll knock the blonde out of her head." Kat's colorful expressions always made me smile, and I couldn't help grinning at that one. "Actually, no. She's asking for $2,200 a month in alimony, probably to ensure I don't interfere with her getting remarried as soon as possible. But aside from that, the settlement she's offering is quite reasonable." I shrugged. I had moved past the crying stage and was now in the acceptance phase of divorce grief. Well, acceptance was a bit of a stretch. I wanted them to pay, and as I thought things through, more clearly my plan was starting to take shape. It would depend on a few factors like who was catering their wedding, but the more I thought about it, the better it felt. "So she must be pretty serious about this jerk? Did she tell you who he is?" Kat asked. "Yeah, and you're going to love this. Reginald Pennington IV." I smirked. Kat's eyes widened. Damn, I never would have pegged Maggie as a gold digger. Neither would I, until now. She had everyone fooled, it seems. I shrugged. Her parents never liked me, so I'm pretty sure they had a hand in this, at least a little. I was never good enough for their precious daughter. Okay. I admit I let a bit of bitterness show there. Well, screw them. Kat shrugged. I can see those wheels turning, Mac. What's your plan? Kat always knew when I was deep in thought. She had seen it enough at work when I had to tackle some tricky problem at the shop or factory. Revenge of epic proportions, I said with a calm smile. Just trust me. This will leave a lasting mark on them for the rest of their lives. All right, I'm almost scared to ask. What's your plan so far? Kat chuckled. I laid out my basic scheme and she burst into uncontrollable laughter. You are one crazy, she squealed, tears streaming down her face from laughing so hard. All right, we need to figure out how to pull this off. So we did. We stayed up drinking beers and hammering out our strategy for the upcoming wedding. We figured that since I wasn't going to contest the divorce, they would likely get married within 1 to 6 months. We'd be prepared. And if I could stay on good terms with Maggie, and even Reginald, I might be able to attend the wedding without causing a scene. By the time I got my suitcase and bag into the guest room, it was well past midnight. I let Kat know I'd be arriving late at the shop since I needed to meet Tim in the morning to sign the divorce papers, and she was understanding. She offered to keep things running smoothly until I got there, or I could take the day off if I preferred. Surprisingly, I slept well that night. Maybe it was the beer we'd had in moderation, or perhaps it was the devious plan I'd crafted to make Reginald Penestini and Maggie's wedding an unforgettable event for them. Either way, I was pleased with our plan. I woke up early with a smile on my face. The sounds of bacon and eggs sizzling on the stove, along with the enticing aroma, pulled me out of bed. Kat also had a fresh pot of coffee brewing, which was even better. I couldn't remember the last time Maggie had made me breakfast, but here was Kat doing it, and we were just temporary roommates. I took a shower and got dressed in a t-shirt and jeans, deciding against heading to the shop after seeing Tim. Then, I went to join Kat in the kitchen. Good morning, Kat. I greeted her with a smile as I took a seat on a bar stool at the kitchen nook. Good morning, sunshine, she responded with a bright smile. You're looking much better today than you did when you arrived last night. Thanks to you and the beer, I said, nodding in appreciation, which earned me a cheerful laugh from her. Her laughter is so contagious that I couldn't help but laugh along. Well, here's some eggs and bacon for you, hun. Are you heading into work after seeing Tim? She placed a plate and a mug of coffee in front of me. Thanks, Kat. Actually, I think I'm going to take the day off. I'm not sure how I'll react after meeting with Maggie and her lawyer for the signing, I shrugged, but I'll take you out for lunch later and fill you in on what happened. Kat nodded. You better, Mac. Honestly, I'm relieved I'm not going with you. If I saw that woman, I'd probably want to smack her. That's one of the reasons I love you, sweetie, I said with a grin. You're the most loyal person I know. Oh, I love you too, boss, she replied sweetly as I stood up and she gave me a hug. Since Kat is only an inch shorter than me, our bodies pressed together closely during the embrace. Hey, both of our exes were unfaithful. I'm glad we're handling it okay, I said, giving her a squeeze before letting go. At least they weren't cheating with each other. Now that would be a cliché, she chuckled, making me laugh too. True enough. But discovering both of us were in the same predicament on the same day? That's the biggest coincidence ever, I said, doing my best comic book guy impression. Kat and I are both big fans of The Simpsons, so she got it instantly and gave me a playful nudge with a laugh. You're right, Mac. What a huge coincidence. This makes the theory of illicit substance fraud even more plausible. Always with your conspiracy theories, I said, rolling my eyes and giving her a cheerful smile. Hey, the truth is out there, Kat said with a mock spooky look. After we finished tidying up and loading her dishwasher, she handed me a key to her place. I was going to give this to Darius, but I think you'll need it more. It's all yours. She grinned. Thanks, Kat. I smiled, kissed her cheek again, and gave her a warm hug. Don't worry, though, I'll find my own place in a few days and won't be a burden. No hurry, Mac, she reassured me. Honestly, I'd rather have you around where I can keep an eye on you than have you on your own, where who knows what might happen. My parents went through a divorce, so I understand how hard it was for my dad when my mom left him. I'm not letting you out of my sight. All right, Mom, I teased, and she playfully swatted my shoulder with a smirk. I'd heard about what happened and how her mom had struggled mentally. She hadn't cheated on Kat's dad, but other issues with her mental health and alcohol led to their divorce. I didn't know all the details, but it wasn't as grim as my own situation. Still, her dad had taken it really hard. To give you some context about our relationship, Kat and I have known each other for 20 years. She's 2 years older than me and looked out for me during our school years. When we were kids, I was smaller than the other boys and often got bullied. Kat, who was already taller than most of the boys and girls, stood up for me, and no one dared to challenge her. But Kat didn't just defend me. She also taught me how to stand up for myself. Since my own family didn't equip me with those skills, she showed me how to fight dirty and handle tough situations. She learned to fend for herself at a young age. By the time we were teenagers, I had grown just enough to be an inch taller than Kat. I had my final growth spurt during my sophomore year of high school, while Kat had stopped growing. She is 6 feet tall, and I'm 6'1", and that's where we've stayed since then. We've both put on some muscle since our lanky days, but we're still in good shape. Kat was a hurdler on the track team, and I played baseball. While Kat's talent earned her a scholarship to USC, I wasn't quite good enough at baseball for a scholarship. So I joined the Army and used my GI Bill to go to school afterward. When I launched the chocolate shop just before marrying Maggie, Kat applied for the manager position. With her MBA, I quickly hired her. In our first year, I couldn't offer her much in salary, but as word spread, we soon faced more business than we could handle. I managed to bring in some great team members, and Kat was and remains the standout among them. I left her in charge after a year to take Maggie on our postponed honeymoon. Kat kept everything running smoothly during those 2 weeks, and by the end of the first year, we were on track to pay off the bank loan and even able to give everyone a substantial raise. By the end of the third year, the shop had expanded with a small factory, complete with a sizable kitchen. I secured contracts for cocoa beans and introduced some delightful exotic blends. In our 5th year, we were shipping special candy orders throughout California, but I was resolute about not franchising. We became nearly a special order-only business. Despite offers of millions for the company, I, along with my employees, refused to sell. They had decided they didn't want to work for anyone but me, and I knew that selling the shop would mean losing my team. That was the turning point for me. I committed to keeping it a small business with my 20 employees, focusing on having fun and making money while we did. That, as it turned out, was the final straw with my in-laws. Maggie's father wanted to invest in my business and help expand it. I turned him down, politely but firmly, explaining that I preferred to keep the business small and family-oriented. He was quite vocal about his disappointment, insisting that expansion was the only way to make significant money. I responded firmly, and less politely, that I was already earning a substantial income and had no desire to be as greedy as he was. I couldn't help but wonder what they'd think about Maggie cheating on me and then divorcing me for Reginald Penistine. I realized I didn't care, but they probably approved. Old money attracts old money, and while the Sullivans weren't as wealthy as the Penningtons, they were still part of that world. So be it. Kat and I headed out that morning after breakfast. She went to work, and I went to meet Tim at his office. When I arrived, Maggie hadn't shown up yet, so Tim and I chatted until she arrived. When she walked in, Tim visibly tensed. It was clear from his body language that Maggie and her lawyer weren't the only ones there. I turned to see little Dickie Pennington himself. At that moment, I was itching to wipe the smug look off his face. Instead, I ignored his handshake and focused on Maggie. "Let's just get this over with," I said with a shrug. Tim went over the proposed division of assets. Since my business was not funded by her or her family's money, and the house was a gift from her parents after her grandparents passed away, those were not considered community property and remained ours. My Mustang was also mine, of course. I'd been restoring it since high school. Tim caught me off guard. "So, you're divorcing my client to marry Reginald Pennington IV. Is that right, Mrs. McDougal?" The question threw her off balance. "Well," she hesitated. "A simple yes or no will do," Tim insisted, not backing down. Her lawyer, who resembled a Gloria Allred imitator, leaned in to whisper something in Maggie's ear. "Yes," Maggie said quietly, looking down as if embarrassed. Tim never addressed her as Mrs. McDougal. "And how soon were you planning on the wedding?" Tim continued. Maggie, Reggie, and Gloria Jr. huddled together, whispering urgently. Tim seized the moment to lean over and whisper in my ear, "Alimony." I simply nodded and smiled back. He was clearly aiming to keep me from paying her anything. When the trio broke their huddle, Maggie looked at Tim once more. "As soon as possible after the divorce is finalized. We've already made most of the wedding arrangements." Tim nodded. "And if these reports are accurate," he pulled out a detailed financial statement regarding Reggie. "Mr. Pennington here, even without factoring in his multiple homes and cars, is worth nearly $1 billion on his own. My question, Mrs. McDougal, is why do you want your honest, hard-working husband to pay you alimony when you could simply ask Mr. Pennington for any amount of money you need?" Maggie once again huddled with Gloria Jr. and El Culo. Tim shot me a quick, mischievous grin, which I returned as the three amigos debated their next move. When they emerged from their huddle, Gloria Jr. spoke up. "What do you consider fair compensation, then?" she asked, her intense gaze fixed on me. "Well, she can have all the furniture, not just her share. I don't care about that." I shrugged. Back into the huddle they went. This time their whispers were more subdued, but eventually they broke away and looked at Tim. "Agreed," said the lawyer. And so it was settled. I didn't have to pay alimony, but I also didn't get any of the furniture. Gloria Jr. made the necessary amendments to the divorce papers, and we all signed them, except for Snakeboy. The filing happened that same day as soon as the lawyer left. As I was heading back to my car, Maggie and Little Man approached me. "Angus, old boy, I hope there are no hard feelings." Little Man extended his hand for a handshake. That settled it. I grabbed his hand and squeezed it with such force that his face twisted in agony. "Call me Angus again, Reginald, and I'll make your life a living nightmare. To you, I'm Mr. McDougal. Understand?" By the time I finished speaking, he was on his knees and I could feel his bones grinding together. Yes, Mr. MacDougal. Please let me go, please." His face was filled with genuine fear. I let go of his hand before it could cause any permanent damage, and he let out a relieved sigh. "That was for calling me Angus," I said calmly. "As for this woman of easy virtue, no hard feelings." I smiled, turned, and walked towards my car, feeling quite pleased. I had managed to avoid paying alimony and would be completely free of her once the divorce was finalized. Oh, that reminded me. I turned back as Maggie was helping Asolio to his feet. "Maggie, before I leave, I need my grandma's engagement ring back," I said, extending my hand. Maggie stared at me as though I had just descended from another planet. Then she removed both the engagement and wedding rings and handed them over. "Thanks," I said with a smile, nodding as I pocketed the rings and walked back to my car. I started the powerful V8 engine, shifted into gear, and released the clutch, hitting the gas. The tires screeched as I tore out of the parking lot, leaving a trail of rubber and smoke. It wasn't something I did often, but I wanted to make a clear statement to the two lovebirds. I glanced in my rearview mirror and the asshole was standing there, bewildered, still cradling his hand. I grinned with satisfaction as I drove toward the shop. When I arrived, Kat and everyone else greeted me warmly. They came over, hugging me or shaking my hand, expressing their apologies. I thanked them all and told them to get back to work, but I said it with a grin to show that I appreciated their support. Honestly, I was already feeling pretty great. Aside from the lawyer fees, half the court costs, and giving up my share of furniture I didn't even like, I had managed to secure a bloodless divorce. "Let's go to lunch, Kat," I suggested. I drove us there in Bullet, and Kat was thrilled with the ride. She could hear the engine rumbling and feel its power like an impressive aura. We enjoyed our meal, laughing and sharing our friendship, while also forging a new connection in the wake of recent betrayals. "I still can't believe I was completely clueless about her cheating on me," I finally admitted, reflecting on my own naivety regarding Maggie. "I must have been really foolish." "No, Mac," Kat said with a reassuring smile as she reached across the table to squeeze my hand. "You were just in love. Love can make us blind, you know." I couldn't help but smile. "Thank you, Kat." I squeezed her hand reassuringly to show how much I appreciate everything she has done for me, both professionally and in her personal life. She was much more to me than just an office manager and a friend. I used to rely on her completely. From my school days, when I was the youngest child in the neighborhood, to my current role as a businessman who hired her because she was the most qualified candidate, she has been my constant support. "You don't have to thank me, Mac. A good award at the end of the year is enough gratitude." She flashed a smile, and I laughed back. "Consider it done." I smiled and looked into her dark brown eyes with my dark blue ones. She looked away first, and I noticed a slight blush on her caramel-colored face. It took me by surprise, but I quickly pulled myself together, although I felt a reaction that I did not expect. I told myself to stop it. She was my friend, and she had recently suffered a loss. In all the years of our friendship, I had never seen Kat except as a friend, although she was incredibly beautiful. Of course, I noticed how attractive and well-built she was, especially last night when I arrived at her house and saw her come outside to greet me. It was hard not to appreciate such an amazing woman like her. But now it was different. I realized that I was not ready for such feelings and quickly turned the conversation to other topics. After we finished lunch, I drove her back to the shop and dropped her off. She said she'd see me at home, so I headed to the bluffs to look out over the Pacific. I glanced at my left hand and removed the ring that had been there for the past 8 years. I also pulled out Maggie's wedding band from my pocket. I examined both rings, and just looking at them made me feel nauseous. Then I took out my grandma's engagement ring and held all 3 rings together. I put the engagement ring back in my pocket, and then threw the wedding bands into the ocean with all my strength. They sparkled in the sunlight as they sailed over the bluffs and fell into the crashing white water below. It felt symbolic to me. My marriage was over, and this was my way of marking its end. Sure, the divorce still had to go through, but this was something I needed to do for my own peace of mind and to be able to move on. Just because I had put my marriage to rest didn't mean I had abandoned my plan for revenge against Maggie and Reggie. I thought of the lyrics from the song Bloodshed. "Payback's a bitch, and I'm paying all." I smiled as I imagined Scott Columbus on the drums of death, Eric Adams belting out the lyrics, Joey DeMaio laying down the bass line, and Ross the Boss scorching the lead guitar. Oh yes, Reggie will pay for kidnapping my wife, and my wife will pay for being greedy for money. Some might call me vindictive or primitive. To those people I'd say, to hell with you. Walk 20 miles in my shoes, then judge me. 3 months later, everything was sorted out. The joint accounts were divided evenly. During that period, Kat and I lived together as roommates and got along really well. No one at work cared that we were living together. The big surprise came when we returned home one night and found the wedding invitations in the mail. Turns out Maggie wasn't joking. They had scheduled the wedding for a month after the formal divorce decree. I looked at Kat with a grin, and she returned it. "All right, it's time to act," I said with a mischievous smile as I drove us to Costco. Finding the wedding caterer was straightforward. He had wanted to work with us a few months ago, but things hadn't worked out. I decided to give him another chance and handle the negotiation myself this time. What had me laughing was that Maggie was planning to wear white and Reggie was going to be in his navy dress whites. He had been a naval aviator early in the war, while I had been part of Captain Drake's Alpha team. It seemed the guy couldn't even wear a standard black tux. A few nights before the wedding, I visited the caterer and swapped the chocolate cake mix with my own special blend. I couldn't help but grin as I replaced the cake mix with something that would make Maggie and Reggie's wedding pretty unforgettable for everyone involved. What I was doing could be seen as a high school prank, but with a lot more flair. I had to get some revenge. They had made a fool of me for 8 months before hitting me with the divorce papers. Granted, Maggie had been very fair during the divorce, leaving me with just a broken heart. But that broken heart was going to cost them. I kept Kat updated on my plan, and she'd laughed hard when I told her that Operation Mudflap was a go. The invitation had included the reception, where the real fun was set to begin. On the morning of the wedding, Kat and I took our showers at the same time, though not together. Despite growing closer over the past few months, we were still tentative about moving our friendship to a more romantic level. Personally, I was concerned that pursuing a relationship might jeopardize what we had. Fortunately, I was grateful for the tankless water heaters. Once I was dressed in my Armani suit, I waited in the living room until Kat was ready. "Do I look presentable?" she asked as I was watching a UCLA football game. I turned to look at her and my jaw dropped. Before me stood a vision that was hard to describe, but I'll give it a shot. Kat wore an emerald green dress that hugged her curves perfectly. The shimmering fabric clung to her like it was enamored with her figure and didn't want to let go. Her shoulder-length hair framed her beautiful face elegantly. Her full, luscious lips were painted a sultry red, and her green eyeshadow matched her dress perfectly. She wore 1-inch pumps that put her at the same height as me, showcasing her toned calves beautifully. The top of her dress barely contained her generous bust, and as she twirled, I caught a glimpse of her caramel-colored back. "My God. You look fantastic," I managed to say once I could finally string together some coherent words. She flashed a perfect smile. "Thanks, Mac. You're looking pretty damn sharp yourself." I blushed at the compliment. "Thanks, Kat," I replied as we made our way out the door. We drove to the church, and ironically, Billy Idol's White Wedding was playing on the radio. As Bullet pulled into the parking lot, the rumble of the big V8 turned heads, and everyone there, except us, seemed to be from the upper-crust old money crowd. This promised to be even more entertaining than I had expected. We showed our invitations to the doorman at the entrance. Doorman might be a bit generous. He looked more like one of Reggie's no-neck security goons who usually accompanied him to public events. Apparently, the Penningtons had made a few enemies over the years due to their business practices, making the no-necks a necessity. This wasn't surprising at all. Reggie's family seemed to follow a do unto others before they do it to you philosophy, their version of the golden rule. Or perhaps, he who has the gold makes the rules. The disdainful glances Kat and I received from the snobbish elite only heightened my anticipation for what was about to unfold. As we settled into our seats in the pew, I leaned over to Kat and whispered in her ear, "Remember, no chocolate at the reception." She responded with a soft giggle and a quick kiss on the cheek. The service was drawn out and tedious, a typical Catholic wedding. I struggled to stay awake several times, but it was what it was. Reggie, in his Navy uniform, looked undeniably impressive. Another reason to dislike him. He had been a Navy officer before quitting to join his family's business. His Annapolis class ring sparkled as he waited for Maggie to make her entrance. When the wedding march started, there she was, escorted by her pompous father. I recalled our own wedding and how he'd glared at me throughout. Now, though, he was grinning with pride that his precious little girl was marrying someone of her own status. I wanted to deck the guy, but held back. I'd settle the score later at the reception. The ceremony continued. I won't bore you with the routine of the wedding vows, which she hadn't taken seriously the first time, or the ring exchange, which she undermined with her affair with that jerk, or anything else for that matter. At the reception, I felt like I won an Oscar, Emmy, Tony, and Golden Globe all at once when I congratulated the newlyweds. Kat would have deserved Best Actress, as she saw Maggie's betrayal as a betrayal of everyone who worked for me and loved her like family. Reggie smugly taunted me with, "Angus, old boy, I hope there are no hard feelings." The better man won in the end. It took all my restraint not to beat him senseless, ruin his testicles, elbows, knees, and make his plastic surgeon very wealthy with a complete face overhaul. Instead, I said, "You're right, the better man did win." Then, I pulled a somewhat taken-aback Kat into a passionate kiss. Kat hesitated for a moment, then responded with equal fervor. Right there, in front of Reggie and Maggie, I claimed Kat with my kiss. The first kiss was incredible. For a moment it seemed to me that the world around us disappeared as our lips met and our tongues intertwined and slowly moved together. Her arms wrapped around my neck, her fingers tangled in my hair. When we finally broke up, Kat turned to Reggie and Maggie and said with a playful wink, "Looks like the best man won." She left the happy couple standing there, somewhat stunned. We exchanged knowing smiles, took our seats, and enjoyed a delicious lobster dinner. The real excitement began when the wedding cake was brought. Reggie and Maggie held a traditional cake-cutting ceremony and, following a playful tradition, smashed the cake in each other's faces. The hall filled with laughter, and the guests eagerly lined up for a piece of cake. We decided to wait for the end of the queue so as not to miss the entertainment. As soon as we got to the cake, everything took an unexpected turn. It all started with the bride's loud farting, and not a quiet one, but a clear, noticeable sound that echoed through the dining room. This was soon followed by the same sound from the groom. I looked in their direction and jokingly said, "You are free," which caused a surprised reaction from the surrounding guests. It seemed that no one was going to lose sight of the unexpected humor of the evening. Then Maggie's expression changed to one of surprise, as a gurgling noise emerged from her, swiftly followed by sheer horror. Reginald grimaced as he detected a foul odor, and soon he released a similar gurgling sound from his backside. They stared at each other in terror as more farts and gurgling noises erupted from the other guests. Maggie and Reggie quickly bolted, and I noticed brown liquid dripping from under her dress, while Reggie attempted to conceal the spreading brown stain on his white dress pants. Both were racing towards the restrooms, soon joined by other guests as they realized they had soiled themselves. Kat and I slipped out quietly and ended up in Bullet, where we finally let loose with laughter. We were both in tears, nearly laughing ourselves sick. "Oh my God, Mac," Kat laughed, clutching her stomach as she guffawed. I was laughing just as hard. "Do you think I used too much?" I asked between bouts of tearful laughter. "How fast does that stuff work?" She laughed again. "Well, the boxes from Costco said it worked well, but not to use too much of it," I replied with a snicker as our laughter began to subside. "How many boxes did you put into the cake mix?" she asked in disbelief. "All of them," I said with a serene smile, which nearly sent Kat into another fit of laughter. I'd used a powdered chocolate-flavored laxative and mixed it into the cake mixes that the caterers had set aside for the Pennington wedding. The cake and cupcakes were almost entirely made up of laxative, since I'd emptied most of the cake mix boxes and replaced their contents with the laxative powder. I had also added some of the laxative to the regular cake mix to ensure it wasn't excessively strong. But wow, I didn't expect it to take effect so quickly. It was the perfect finishing touch. Ha ha. That night I'd visited the caterer under the pretense of discussing a contract for the chocolate produced by my factory. He had reached out to me a few months earlier, and I'd promised to follow up. I told him that we had been somewhat behind schedule due to several team members falling ill, but that once we were back on track, I could bring him some samples. His greedy expression suggested he was anticipating a generous offer. During the tour of his facility, he showed me the kitchen and mentioned they were catering the Pennington wedding. I already knew this, of course, but he was unaware that the bride was my unfaithful, gold-digging ex-wife. I played along, and once he dismissed his staff for the day, he returned to his office after shaking my hand. He said he would prepare the contract and inform me and Tim when it was ready. However, I suspect he completely forgot about that contract in the days following the wedding. Once everyone had left and I exited his office, I headed to the back door of the kitchen, propped it open, and drove around to switch the powdered cake mix with the powdered chocolate laxative. After that, I made sure to latch the kitchen door securely and took care to leave no traces of the boxes I had brought with me. One of the lessons that Captain Drake taught us at the time was that you should always leave no trace. He's a reliable guy. The last I heard, he quit his job and now works as a professor of history at the University of California, Los Angeles. By the day of the wedding, there was no evidence left. Nothing could connect me to this super sweet pie. Only Kat and I knew about this plan, but she didn't say a word. When Kat and I returned home, she looked at me with a serious expression on her face. "Mac, about that recent kiss," she began. "Kat, I know I crossed the line, but you looked so amazing that I couldn't help myself," I blurted out. She gently put her finger to my lips. "Let me finish, baby," she said. "This kiss was the best in my life. You're a good person, and for a white guy, you're damn good. What I'm trying to say is that I think we'd be great together." She blushed slightly, and I bent down to kiss her. Our lips met. We kissed with love and tenderness, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that I had been missing something wonderful for too long. When our lips finally parted, we looked into each other's eyes. "I also think that we would be good together." "There's only one way to find out," I said with a smile, and she smiled back. Once we were inside, we ended up on the bed. We spent the rest of the day and night in bed together, enjoying each other's company. Some may wonder why I negotiated with the caterer in this way. The problem arose because Sal, the owner of the establishment, offered Kat an advance when she first met with him to discuss business, back when he first showed interest. After she gave him a strong rebuff, she advised him not to work with him. What changed was that when they were announced as the organizers of the Pennington wedding, I saw an opportunity to pay off and have some fun. The consequences of the so-called Brown wedding were not long in coming. News channels and newspapers covered the event the next day, showing dramatic footage and photos of the bride, groom, and guests rushing to the toilets. We gathered all the guys and girls from Kat's store to watch this spectacle. Although we were not visible in the footage, everyone knew that we were participating in it. We laughed so much that we even cried watching the elite guests trying to get to the toilets, as if their lives depended on it. It was clear that many members of high society were extremely confused by the pictures of their struggle to deal with the mess. The only ones I felt sorry for were the janitors who had to clean up the mess afterward. About a week after the wedding disaster, the police showed up asking questions. Kat and I had been at the wedding, but we both claimed we left when the chaos started, as we were concerned for our own well-being. We managed to keep a straight face during the questioning, only bursting into laughter once the detectives had left. We never heard from them again. Reggie sued the caterer, but Sal, the caterer, skipped the country instead of settling the claim. Last we heard, he had fled to Italy, his homeland. What happened to him after that is unknown. Less than a year after the wedding, Reginald Pennington IV was caught in bed with another man's wife. The man who caught him? Her husband, who was not at all kind to Reggie. He contacted Maggie, who had quite a few harsh words for Reggie when she arrived at the husband's house. Shortly after that, Maggie showed up at the doorstep of our new house. At least Reginald ended up losing one of his virtues in the ensuing fight. It seemed that while Maggie had no issue with cheating herself, she absolutely couldn't tolerate her husband being unfaithful. Quite the double standard, wouldn't you agree? Yes, Kat and I moved into a bigger place since her 2-bedroom apartment was no longer sufficient. We settled into a 4-bedroom ranch-style house, and I managed to pay off half of it by the end of the first year. It appeared that Reggie had made Maggie sign a prenuptial agreement, stipulating that if she filed for divorce for any reason, she would leave with nothing but what she brought into the marriage. She still had her $125K a year job, but that was all. No billions for Maggie Sullivan. Late the following year, we heard a knock at the door. Kat was 4 months pregnant, so I gave her a quick kiss and hurried to answer it myself. I opened the door to find Maggie in tears. "What do you want, Maggie?" I asked with a neutral tone. "I'm so sorry, Mac. I'm really sorry for everything," she cried. "Well, you were the one who wanted to move on," I said with a shrug. "What happened?" "I caught Reginald cheating on me," she confessed, her sobs growing more intense. "Wow, that's rough," I remarked, somewhat sarcastically. "Mac, I'm truly sorry. I was wondering if there might be any chance—" She trailed off when she saw Kat, who was pregnant, walking up behind me. "Who's at the door, babe?" Kat asked as she approached, smiling at Maggie. "It's Maggie, and she was just about to leave," I said, shutting the door in my ex's face. I secured the deadbolt and wrapped my arms around Kat. "She's the past. You're my future. I love you, sweetheart." "Oh, I love you too, baby," she replied, giving me a kiss. Kat and I had eloped shortly after we discovered her pregnancy. It was a small civil ceremony, her idea. And just like that, we were husband and wife. She's still my manager at the shop and one of my closest friends. I love my wife,